Alright, if you are new to saltwater fly fishing and you're targeting redfish and you're wondering what flies you should have in your box, this video is for you. I still remember the first time that I walked into a fly shop to pick up some flies, and I started looking at all the flies and I was like, what am I looking at? What do I need here? I want to catch a redfish. What do I need to put in my fly box? And it can be overwhelming, especially if you're not used to fishing for redfish, even in a conventional sense. So this video is meant to help out those guys that are walking in there in terms of what they should be looking for. And I'm going to break it down to 4 of my go-to flies when it comes to redfish. And this video is definitely geared towards the beginner crowd. One of the flies that I'm going to talk about in here, I don't use very often. Actually, I don't even know the last time I used a spoon fly. But if you're a beginner, I still think it's a good idea to have a couple of them with you. Let's get into it.
Convict killer.
The tried and true fancy crab.
Sea deucer, baby.
Alright, so the first fly that I'm going to talk to you guys about today is the Seducer. Now, this is one of my go-to flies. I'll tell you right now, it's not one that's very commonly found in a fly shop. If you look hard enough in a fly shops, you might be able to find a couple, but I highly recommend you guys check these out. I've got a video on how I tie them, and I'll leave it up there for you guys. The video is made for tying them on 2-aught for Louisiana. I would recommend, if you're coming to the Texas coast, look at tying them on a number 2. The beauty of these flies is you can tie them on a 2-aught, you can tie them on a number 2, you can tie them on a 6-aught. I mean, you can tie them on any size hook you want. You can make them as big or as little as you want. There's really no wrong answer to size. It all depends on the fish you're going after. And the next thing is when it comes to color for these flies, I tend to gravitate towards a grizzly one. Natural colors or white. I've got a bunch that are also in olive in my fly box, as well as some black and purple. Depends on the water, depends on the fish. It's always a good idea to go down to your local fly shop, talk to those guys and kind of see what colors are working. And if you're coming down to an area you don't normally fish, you can try calling and just talking to the fly shop guys over the phone and see if you can get some good intel that way. Regardless, Seducer, you should have them in your fly box. Highly recommend them. Love these flies. When it comes to weight on these flies, I'll tie them weightless. I'll tie them with small lead eyes. I'll tie them with B-chain eyes. Again, it's going to depend on where you're going to be fishing and how deep that water is. Most of where I'm fishing is a foot of water, so I don't put a lot of weight on them. When it gets into summertime and the grass is really high, I'll go weightless. And that actually lets them sit. They'll either float on the water or they'll just kind of come right below and they'll stay right above that grass. So Seducer, check out the video, learn how to tie them. If you're new to tying, this is a great starting point also. So again, I said it like 20 times, Seducers, you should have them in your fly box. All right, the next fly that I'm going to talk to you guys about is a spoon fly. Now not even going to get into the controversy around spoon flies. If you are new to fly fishing, if you are a beginner, you're new to fly fishing in salt water, I highly recommend that you have some spoon flies with you. I like to use them if I'm going into an area where I don't know really what to expect, where to look, just because you can get them out, you can work them fast, and they're gonna, through the way they move through the water, you're more likely to find fish that you're not seeing. And again, if you're a beginner, you're out there to have fun. You're not trying to get super technical. I think you should be carrying some spoon flies. These flies you're going to find in any fly shop you walk into. Highly recommend carrying a few spoon flies with you. Alright, the next 2 flies that I'm going to talk to you guys about are actually from my friends over at Sightcast. That they tie these flies up. They're great flies, and they're actually really versatile, especially down here on the Texas coast, because I can use them to target redfish, and they're also two of my favorite flies for targeting black drum. And if you get lucky, you can pull a sheep's head off. I am still trying to. One day it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. One day I'm gonna put a sheep's head in the boat. I can feel it. But let's get into them. All right, the first of these two flies that I'm going to talk to you guys about is the convict killer. Now, the convict killer is a tiny little fly that I like to go to when I know there's black drum in the area. I'll also start fishing it if the fish are getting really spooky, because it is on a number 4 hook and it has enough weight on it that it gets down to the bottom real quick, so I can get it over to a fish quickly. It doesn't make a lot of noise hitting the water, and it has enough movement once it's in the water that I don't have to move the fly a lot, which if you're presenting to those spooky fish is a plus. The next thing about this fly that's really great is that you can get it down on the bottom and you can just leave it there. And it's got rabbit fur. It's a rabbit fur body with a rabbit fur tail, and so it has a lot of movement as it's sitting down on the bottom, which means that especially when you're fishing black drum, they want to pick that fly up. They're not going to chase after it. You'll see it, but it's the exception more than the norm. Normally, they're going to catch that little bit of movement from that tail moving, and they're going to rush over and they're going to pick it up off the bottom and hopefully not spit it out. If you're in the Texas coast and they're selling sidecast flies at a fly shop, you're going to be able to find these. If not, check out the sidecast website and order you a few before you come down this way. Great little flies. Again, recommend getting a few of them. I typically lean towards the black ones, but the olive ones, I've got a few in my fly box just in case it's that kind of day. So check them out. Get a couple. All right, the last fly that I'm going to talk to you guys about is from sidecast as well, and it's called the straight shooter crab. Now, if you've watched enough rough logs, you've heard Zach and I refer to these things as the fancy crab. These things look amazing. They are one of our kind of last resort flies that we go to because they look so good. We don't like to use them, and they do cost a little bit more than a normal fly, which is the other reason we don't want to lose them. But they're dynamite. These things look so realistic. You get them down, fish see that movement as they're dropping, and they get hammered. These are great flies. And again, it's one that I highly recommend you guys picking up. We've had a lot of luck on them, and it's another one of those flies that you can, with black drum or redfish, you want to get it down on the bottom and you want to move it across the bottom. So that slow, steady strip right across the bottom, move it like that. The fish will pick up that movement and they're going to dive down, pick it up, and eat it. So, yeah, straight shooter crab, fancy crab, whatever you want to call it. Pick some up, and again, if you're in a fly shop, especially along the Texas coast, and they're selling sidecast flies, there's a good chance you'll find some of these in there. If not, I'm going to leave the sidecast link down below so you guys can check those things out as well. All right, so the last kind of group of flies I want to talk to you about is more a general group of flies, not really a specific fly. And it's more about what else you should be looking for if you're looking for a fly to come down to the Texas coast with. Those 4 that I already talked about, I highly recommend. But if you want to look for some other options, I'm going to give you some kind of base guidelines to look for. Hook size, smaller I think is a little bit better down here. Obviously you don't want to go too small because you don't want them swallowing it. But number 2 seems to be the sweet spot for the Texas coast. The next thing is when it comes to color. What are you looking for color? I generally start with stuff that is natural colors, so those tans with little bits of sharp, like a sharp neon orange or some blue or a little bit of both. Most of the fish that we're catching down here are feeding on crabs and they're feeding on shrimp. So think what's going to look like a crab, what's going to look like a shrimp. The next thing is I'll use some whites. When it gets super clear out, I'll use a little bit of whites. that's kind of it's harder for me to go in that direction. The general direction that I'll go in is as the water gets dirty, I'll start using darker and darker flies. So I might move into the olive, I might move into the blacks. And again, it's a really good idea to have a good solid start point of flies that are in that natural color area, and then have a few that are darker. A lot of it's going to depend on what part of the Texas coast you're going to be fishing. The further south you go, the cleaner the water is going to be, and that's when those natural colors are going to be more prominent. So again, look for those kind of colors. Now when it comes to weight, that's going to depend largely on the water depth you're fishing at. Most of these fish are cruising along the bottom. They're looking for crabs and shrimp, like I said. So you're going to want a fly that's going to be able to get down to them. Most of the time, something with like a small or medium V-chain eye or a small lead eye is going to have enough weight to get down to these redfish. It's also a good idea to carry along, to have in your arsenal some weightless flies. So like I mentioned earlier, I'll tie up some weightless seducers. Anything that's got a lot of deer hair that's going to float really high in the water column without any weight on it, that's a good option as well. Basically, that's for when you get into where you're fishing in just a few inches of water, or maybe you're in a foot of water with 9 inches of grass, and the grass will get tall like that. If it's like that, then again, you want something that's going to stay above that grass. The fish, when you're seeing those fish in that tall grass, they're going to be really hard to pick out, and generally when you do see them, they're up on top of the grass and they're just cruising along. So hopefully that gives you guys kind of a baseline on where to start when you're starting to put together a fly box to come down to Texas. A lot of those flies I think would be good options too elsewhere, but my kind of, I guess, specialty right now is redfish along the Texas coast, so that's what I can speak the best to. It is always a good idea, I think, to talk to a local fly shop. Go in there, talk to them, ask them what's going on, what's good, what's bad, get a general feel for things. Most of the guys that I've ever run into in fly shops, anywhere from Florida to Virginia to Texas, they love talking about fishing. They love helping guys out. So go in there, talk to them, buy a couple flies, get some intel before you hit the water. All right, guys, man, I hope that was helpful for any of you guys looking at coming to Texas and you guys getting into the redfish in saltwater. I hope that was really helpful for you guys. If you do have more experience and you got any flies you absolutely love, leave them down in the comments below. Let's help. I mean, a big part of this channel, I think, is trying to help guys not only get into saltwater fly fishing, but getting into it the right way. And I think making a community around that is really a goal of mine. So any of you guys with more experience that have made it this far, leave some of your fly recommendations down below. You don't have to give away the secret sauce. Trust me, I'm not going to do it, so don't feel like you should do it. But hit like, hit subscribe, all that stuff, and I will see you guys soon.